Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwan, and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about the Zoar COD series with Part 3, the final part. If you have not checked out Part 1 or Part 2, please click down in the description below. You'll have a link to either 1 or 2. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and if you have any suggestions, just comment down below. But with that said, let's dive into Part 3 with 40 facts of the Kiarii Wars. The Kiarii Wars that erupted in the 27th millennium, and which would last for more than 3 solar decades, marked the end of Zoar COD's prosperity and unity of purpose. In the wake of the successful defense of the lunar colonies and the contribution of the hybrid battle automaton clads to this venture, the Kiarii and the Imanari Forge Fanes began to work closely together, first at the injunction of the Supreme Domini, who pushed for a mass production of the Imanari hybrid battle automatons, and later for their own free will. Since the success of these hybrids had elevated them in the Supreme Domini's esteem, the union between the Kiarii and the Imanari Forge Fanes was further solidified by the development of the first exemplars of the Black Iron Cores, which began testing amongst the Titan legions, earning them even more attention and gratitude from the office of the Supreme Domini. While some Forge Fanes had been called upon to work with the Kiarii and the Imanari, most Forge Fanes viewed the Imanari's rise in influence with barely hidden contempt. Not all the Forge Fanes had fully embraced the Zoar COD's mentality that the end would justify the means, and had purposefully refused to pursue heretic practices like the Imanari. In fact, many of the smaller Fanes were openly shocked at the blatant disregard the Imanari and the Kiarii Forge Fanes, and even the Supreme Domini, showed for the Forge World's doctrinal purity. With the rise of the Imanari and the Kiarii, those Forge Fanes that would form the so-called Purist faction grew anxious over the growing power of the Imanari and their allies. As fewer and fewer Forge Fanes subscribed to the ideology that using the enemy's technology against them, or studying forbidden technology, would result in survival, the battle lines were drawn. The Kiarii Wars began in the year 827 of the 27th millennium, with the assassination of the Forge Domini of the Kiarii Forge Fane, then the largest military specialist Forge Fane, as its task was the production of diver class of automatons and their weapons. The Forge Domini suffered severe radiation poisoning from the contaminated nutrition shot, a nutrition shot that could be traced back to the Nari Nutrifane, a Fane notoriously aligned with the Puritist faction. Paranoia soon flared into open conflict, as first the Kiarii and the Imanari, and later their supporters, took up arms against the Purists, seeking retribution for the assassination of the Kiarii Forge Domini. By the time the Forge Domini succumbed to the poison 6 solar hours later, the first shots of the Kiarii Wars had already been fired. Yet there was no sudden explosion of violence, for the Civil War was more of a sporadic, slow-burning conflict that was marked more by border clashes, sabotage, or individual assassination attempts than the two forces openly facing off on a battlefield. The fighting was mostly contained to the Imanari and the Kiarii Forge Fanes, the latter of which suffered considerable damage due to its lack of effective leadership. Many of the smaller, more specialized Forge, Nutri, or Hydro Fanes were attacked by larger Fanes against which they stood little to no chance. The Supreme Domini retreated to an orbital fortress and did not participate physically in the ensuing carnage. She barred the Titan Legion from intervening, but ordered her own force to occupy vital planetary infrastructure and defend them from any aggressors. While she openly condemned the violence and repeatedly called for the ceasefire, her calls, communications, and envoys were largely ignored. Eventually, pressure from external Xeno attack, several worker strikes and revolts, and general deprivation caused the Civil War to wane. In almost 3 solar decades of fighting, approximately 80% of Zoar COD's Forge Fanes had sustained damage, with fully half of them running at minimal capacity, and a further 20% either rendered non-functional or destroyed outright. The results of the Kiarii Wars were inconclusive, for while the Kiarii Forge Fane was almost destroyed by its opponents, and the Imanari Forge Fane had been severely damaged, the might of their hybrid battle automaton had inflicted considerable more damage on their opponents' armies. With the purist faction claiming victory in all but name, the Supreme Domini was finally able to convene every forged Domini at a council called into order to broker a peace. But when the negotiations began, it quickly became obvious that both parties had quite different views on how to proceed. The purists naturally advocated for the dissident forges of the Imanari and the later Kiarii to be punished for the sins their research had committed against the machine god, portraying their creation as dangerous, which needed to be terminated. For her own reasons, the Supreme Domini was loath to accept this proposition, as the security of Zaur-Kad's dominions now heavily rested on these hybrid automatons the purists wanted destroyed. On the other side, the Imanari, now clearly the leaders of their faction, merely called for an armistice, while more to the liking of the Supreme Domini. This proposition was equally problematic, since it would not prevent the purists from attacking again. From the Supreme Domini's perspective, the wars had started only because the purists did not share the belief of the Imanari faction. In the end, she chose a quite different path to resolve the conflict: isolation, since neither of the two factions were ready to recant their beliefs, and cohabitation between the two doctrines only led to strife. Each and every Forge Fane was forbidden from maintaining contact with its neighbors, allowing each Forge Fane's research to become their sole property. Cooperation like the joint venture between the Imanari and the Kiarii Forge Fanes was no longer allowed, as every Forge Fane would treat directly with the office of the Supreme Domini, which would now oversee the global efforts of Zaur-Kad, becoming the central authority all others would rely upon to acquire the resources they needed to further their research. To prevent physical contact, many tunnels that had previously allowed for movement between forges were collapsed or filled, the rest passing under the authority of the Supreme Domini, whose force would patrol them exclusively. In addition, each Forge Fane was permitted only defensive-clad emplacements amongst the lunar colonies, and those were forfeit to the control of the Supreme Domini. Thus did Zaur-Kad return to peace. For the next several years, the Forge Fanes worked on isolating themselves from their neighbors, and the Forge world sunk into a strange, guarded, knife-edge stability that doubtlessly arrested Zaur-Kad's further development, but offered its people a stability which would last until the world's discovery by the roaming fleets of the Imperium of Man. If the Kiarii Wars had had one victor, it was the office of the Supreme Domini, for it now held complete control over all of Zaur-Kad, the industrial output of the lunar colonies, and the newly established mining colonies on Niddos, which had been founded by the refugees trying to escape the violence unleashed by the Kiarii Wars. While the threat of Xenos raids could never be truly eradicated, and the threat considerably limited the development of the new colony, the might of Zaur-Kad's armies mostly held the worst deprivation at bay. Under the Supreme Domini's authority, each of the lunar colonies would form its own militia to man the ever-growing orbital defenses being built, while the Forge Fanes had to contribute a certain tithe in order to allow for the reconstruction and continual improvement of the defenses. In exchange for this tithe, each Forge Fane and even the lunar colonies were trusted to mostly conduct their own affairs as they deemed fit. And those were 40 facts on the Kiarii Wars. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for staying to the very last video of this Zaur-Kad's story of the Forge World. It's pretty long, and you are a trooper if you watched all three videos. Link down in the description to the wiki page where you guys can get more information on this, as well as more information on different Forge worlds. So definitely check that out. If you guys have any suggestions of other Forge worlds that you guys would like us to talk about, or any world in general, just comment down below. With that said, guys, I'll see you tomorrow. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Holy